We did it. We saved the shop. We got the car built to Arkansas and back. We have it back in Albuquerque. We've got it here at the shop on the car lift. So we're just going to do basically a checkup because there are some things wrong with it. So we're going to get it up in the air, look underneath it. Also going to just double check everything's still tight because we did have some stuff loosen up on the drive, and just make sure everything's there, and then kind of show you underneath because I know we didn't get any shots of exhaust or that part because in the garage it's kind of hard with that not being as high. So now we're going to be able to get it up in the air and get to show you underneath and see what broke. Okay, one, we got the car lifted all the way as high as it can go, and I still don't fit under it. Just making that point.
Yeah.
Okay, we're starting in the back of this car because some of it hadn't been seen or really even talked about. Well, I was able to get, which wasn't priority, but I was able to get it done. The rear sway bar Island Engineering here, fully adjustable, and kind of played with that and kind of got it where I like it now. So that's all new bushings there. And we also were able to get the springs in as well. The Island Engineering springs, so those are good. Everything else under here has been not touched. Eventually, we're gonna come in, I'm gonna be boxing in these arms and the bushings and the subframe. All that's gonna get pulled out in the next thing for this car. That's our next job, is to get this rear subframe out, get everything refreshed, painted, new bushings, just like the front and back in. Also, hopefully find a limited slip because this is still a stock diff. And one thing we're gonna check out too is I built the whole exhaust. Everything was stainless steel except for this pipe that goes up and over. And it's been hitting, and I don't know if we'll be able to see it at all, but under a load, it'll just nick the drive shaft, and it looks like it's more or less self-cleared. You can see right there. It looks like it's shaved off a little on the drive shaft too.
Oops.
It more or less self-cleared like I said it would.
Yeah. You didn't say what part would self-clear.
And I'm pretty positive I can loosen up some of these clamps. No, because it is hitting against the body of the car. So really that's it. We might pull it off because we're gonna replace this muffler. This is the cherry bomb that I had welded on. As you see, there's a joint here. So all I'll have to do is unbolt this, slide that out, and I'm gonna build another 90 and 90 to that Borla, and that Borla muffler will sit in here. The exhaust and back there, and then as we move forward, we're gonna go up to the transmission where we have the new Guibo and all the bolts there, and those all look like none of them loosened up, which is good. But I noticed some weird play in the shifter, and after we replaced all those bushings, it shouldn't. And I just noticed that, there it is, that one of the bolts, the Allen bolt for it, is loosened up. So it's actually sticking out right here. So the one that goes up into the transmission, that one did loosen up. And so we're gonna need to tighten that down. The other side
Way up in there.
did not as much. So that's something that I definitely felt it, like that bracket just slowly getting looser and looser. Now that we're at the transmission, the second gear synchro was going out. You couldn't really downshift it at high RPMs, which sucked, but it was still doable, but you could still go from first to second with no issue. Now, after our drive and everything, going from first to second, it likes to just pop back out. It can't quite find the gear, it grinds. I have a second one, see if that one's good. Looks like gotta adjust this gas pedal, so I never got any bushings for it, never came with them. I'd like to find some, but it definitely is a little looser, so it needs to be tightened up. The clutch did great. Everything in there looks, that I could see through the hole, looks fine. Now again, we come up, we have the Danger brace that we've shown before. So anyone that hasn't seen the other videos where we kind of gave the rundown of this, I'll do a little bit of talking on what has been done to this subframe, especially now after driving it, and kind of I think it definitely benefited it.
Yeah.
So instead of running a single shear point on these, this bracket goes across and makes it a double shear point, which kind of boxes in your control arms, which I think is extremely smart. I also boxed in the subframe down here, so that's all the way plated all the way across, where normally they just have a little plate. And then we have these beautiful Danger chromoly extended control arms, and these are awesome. And also the Island Engineering adjustable sway bar, which I think I got mostly adjusted to where I like it. So that'll be good. That all performed awesome, and I don't see anything. And we're gonna go over with bolts or with a wrench and just to check everything. Oh, so with the weird vibrations, this one of the bolts had broken when building it, and I wasn't worried, but it's this
That's that
splash
vibrating noise.
So that splash shield right in there is loose, and it'll vibrate and like move it there. It just kind of sits there and does that. So I think when we go to pull the wheels off into the brake, I'm gonna figure out how to attach that nicer. So we still had that oil leak, and we can see the oil build up along here and all the dirt. Even though it's a fresh engine build, there's still the oil and stuff, which kind of sucks because this side's extremely clean with no leaking. But that's just something that I'm gonna have to address eventually. But we could see up under there that it's just been leaking at that top timing chain cover, and just running down the whole thing, and you get a little burnt oil smell. But we haven't had, it doesn't significantly leak to where I have to top it off all the time. Actually, like, the level was still really good even from the trip. I haven't even added any in. So the leak's still driving me nuts because it's a fresh engine build and it leaks.
Yeah, you want
so I want
to
to eventually sort that out, and I don't know if that's going to take getting that machined again, cleaned up, more RTV or something. So while it's up here, we're going to just wipe it down. Besides that, everything else is in there. All the engine mounts look like they didn't, nothing loosened up. They all had nylon locking nuts, and we'll go up in there and check. Oh, and then we could drop the car and we'll show you under the engine bay. The alternator wire loosened up on us, which caused a charging issue, but it was easily solved by tightening that nut. We have some weird wear on the tires for sure because the alignment
They're not as
isn't
bad though as I
perfect.
thought. I mean, they're a little more on the outer.
Yeah, they have some
ear,
cupping,
and
but
then some cupping. Yeah.
but they are not too bad for just a home alignment job real quick. I didn't even really get a straight line out. I just kind of guessed. And obviously this is running a lot more camber than stock, so that's gonna have some weird wear. Shoot up in here. These are those ducts in the front of the car, and they had these like hoses that ran to the brakes up in there. So I think next two is to redo these, and actually I'm gonna try to build a duct system to the brakes and a thing around the brakes so it actually has air ducting through it and potentially cools, even though we really didn't have any brake issues, just future preventative stuff.
Since we have it up on the list, I want to ask you a few questions. So, obviously, you've driven this car without all this suspension. Would you say like the investment in the lower A arms, you know, the bracing, all that, was it, in your opinion, worth it?
Yeah, if you're wanting to go this far with your suspension, because I'm gonna say this is about as far as you're gonna get to where like you're doing like next thing would be coilovers, and that's about it, honestly.
Yeah.
Or brakes. But suspension wise, I think I basically did everything you can get off the shelf.
Yeah, every
except for
bolt-on thing
coilovers. Yeah, even welding on stuff.
I was gonna say.
I don't know how much I noticed. Like even the subframe boxed in, I'm gonna say, I don't know. I just have more peace of mind that that's boxed in and that this bracket is double shear point. Like I said, I don't know if that really does prove anything, but it does give me a better peace of mind, especially taking in those turns really hard and you're putting a lot of pressure just on that bolt, to know that this is a little bit more supported for sure. When it comes to these A-arms, these are definitely a lot stronger, and I definitely noticed that camber getting into those turns, you know, the wheels would push and got more grip. Definitely had lots of grip. So that camber being there, and when you go to take the turn and the wheel actually levels out and grips, did awesome. So I really like these control arms. Those did cool. The subframe took some adjusting. It was a little stiff at first. Definitely the rear.
Too stiff.
Yeah, I had adjusted it just on the fly, and I definitely had it too stiff. I had these brackets, if you come over back here, the way these adjust is more or less infinite. So you slide this bracket more or less forward or back on the sway bar itself. And I had this pushed pretty far, which makes it a lot stiffer. So you bring it back because now it's a further fulcrum point or further point. So it'll pivot easier.
Yeah.
It flexes more. So I moved that back, and I think it's about an inch is where they suggest. And I definitely noticed that helped out in the rear, because the rear definitely felt a little too stiff and it was kind of floating. And then the front is just the two holes, and I put them in the furthest back. Also obviously this is at full droop, so everything's a little cockeyed. But when it was at this hole, it had some weird pinch points here and just didn't quite mount right. So with these control arms, this is really the only place you can put it to get a nice movement on this. But for those suspension components, I think it was great. The sway bar, the control arms, definitely noticed a difference. Like I said, this bracing, it couldn't be, because I also have a strut brace up top. So everything in this car is extremely mounted. There's not as much flex, if any, like it used to have, which has its plus and minuses. I think the only thing that's still stock are these front control arms, and these have just rubber bushings in them. I left them like that just to soften it up a little bit, because you can get poly nylon bushings, which I feel like would just be then way too much, because I already have them throughout everything else. And then with the Stage 2 springs, those aren't too bad from Ireland. I like them. They are stiff, which is good. They still rides a little taller than I want it to, even after driving. It definitely is settled. So I might go in and cut one spring out.
And would you say also a part of that, because the wheel wells on this have been cut, right?
Oh yeah, you have such more space. So
than your stock ones, right?
That's true. So like the end of the fender is definitely higher than a stock one. So if it was on a stock body, it probably would look lower. But since these are more higher arched, you have more clearance, which is great. But then on a
tire to body ratio,
it looks more. There's more of a gap, because like we had the braided lines; those all did great in the front. We definitely had zero brake fade or anything. I know it's underneath the car, not a lot of people see, but while it's up, I want to also wipe it down. And we used all that Eastwood undercoating, and it's actually really awesome. And I mean, these have been powder coated, but the rest of it, that paint. And there's no need for degreaser or really anything.
Yeah, it's coming right off.
I just wipe everything off.
And that's the Eastwood, what is it?
There's the Eastwood chassis paint.
Chassis paint.
Cool, so we're wiping it down, and then just wanted to show you that this paint held up really well. Cool. Okay, another thing, Daniel was just checking the wheel bearings. Didn't even think about it, but this one is substantially loose, and it's not lugs or anything. It's definitely the wheel bearing. So we're gonna
compared to this one, which is fine. So hopefully we didn't blow the bearings, but this one's like no play at all.
Yeah, so we're gonna pull this, double check it, tighten it down. But also I'm pretty sure these bearings,
I mean, it rolls nicely even with it loose like that. There's no like,
yeah, it's fine. It's just gonna wear it out really bad. Yeah. So we're gonna get this at a little lower and get this wheel off now.
Yeah.
And check that out.
Might as well address it.
Okay, so that's mostly the underside suspension, a couple loose bolts. But we're gonna lower the car now and show you a couple things under the hood that loosened up or went wrong or didn't like. So we're gonna get this down on the ground and show you that. This was the one issue, is this little nut right here. This is your power for your alternator that runs to the car. This nut loosened up, so it was barely making a connection, which was causing an issue. And I feel like this kind of got a little crusty. So this wire, I'm gonna go through, trace it back, and probably replace it. It felt
a little crunchy.
So, and it's definitely older. I know that one is original-ish. I didn't replace that wire, but yeah, it does feel a little whatever. And the other day driving it, the light kind of came on and went back off after I wiggled it. So I really just need to cut it down. Probably put a little thicker gauge wire in there and be done. Also, one of the nuts for the alternator was just missing, but I caught that before we left.
Oh,
so I was able to get that on so the bracket didn't fall off. This is cool. This is I don't know. This is an Amazon special, like a $20 thing. But what's neat about it is when the engine's running, it displays the tach. So it displays your RPMs. So that way when you're tuning the engine, it's when you're tuning the engine, you can see the RPM gauge right there, and you can sit here and adjust the throttle stuff.
Yeah,
So I really
it's
like
huge.
that. Also, the fact that it's an hour meter, so I know at least I have just over 11 hours. So I put it on after we drove the car for a little bit, so it has 11 hours on it.
Probably
11
12.
and a half, 12. Probably
It
honestly
says 11
13.
now. 11.6.
Yeah, so it's probably on like 14 hours.
Yeah.
If we had. So that's really cool. So if you want to find one of these, this is just Amazon, and if you want, I'll message me and I could send you the link of where I bought it. But it's super simple. All you do is you wrap it around one ignition wire. So I have it around, I think this is like the number 1. It's wrapped around, and then I just put the tape around it and make sure it's away from all the other wires, so it's kind of set over, or else it'll get the feed off of the other wires. But it's super easy. There's nothing else to it. It has a battery in it. Not ashamed of it, but like I wasn't looking forward to seeing if it was good or not. But the Amazon carburetor did good.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
It runs great. I noticed back at altitude here at 6,000 feet, it does tend to flood a little bit because we are, there's less oxygen, so I think that I need to adjust the fuel
Thinner air.
ratio a little
Yeah.
more. But down in Arkansas, holy crap,
It was
this
a
thing
ripper.
just started right up when it was at, 800 feet.
Yeah.
This thing was awesome. So
Yeah.
for $100, there's a dozen different companies that sell them, so I can't tell you which one. But this one is the knockoff 3838 Weber, and it came with all the bracketry. It even came with the thing to put a manual choke, but I did the electrical, which has been okay. It's a little finicky. The cooling system worked great.
Yeah.
I had a lot of people comment on this, and it's totally understandable. So if you look at how this is, it's somewhat almost pinched. It's very thin, and like it should be stretched out a little bit more. I think I'm gonna end up cutting this to pull it forward a little, but at the same time, I have zero cooling issues. This one and the one down there, if you can get a good shot of it,
Yeah.
it's twisty, and there you go. It's kind of twisted and like right in here, and it comes to a weird bend. They work great, and I think it's just because this is a slightly bigger radiator. I have all these blue ones from Ireland, but the opening in this radiator is bigger, so it wouldn't fit over it. So I had to reuse them, which I was bummed because it would have been nice to have all new stuff. But steering's been great after rebuilding the gearbox, and I think we mentioned the engine bushings feel like they're softening up, so that's been nice. So we could show here. This is just an installation boot. It's traditionally for hydraulic lines, fuel lines, aircraft. It's for whatever, but I mean, they're generally on aircraft. It's up to like 650 degrees. And since I'm not running the heat shield on here, we do have the header wrap.
Yeah.
Still wanted some protection, and surprisingly, I had just enough to go over all 4 of them, and they just slip right over, and they've worked out really well.
Yeah, there was no issues when it came to that.
And it also was nice because they go in there and they kind of support them, because if anyone has these cars, they know that they just loosely sit in here, and so these in there are kind of filling that hole and keep the plugs from wiggling as much. Fuel pump did great. This was, some people have asked why when you go electric. Honestly, it's just easier. And yeah, we'll go over, because there's some questions and stuff that like with Mid-America that people were asking me about it. But the reason I went mechanical, I have an electric pump, but this was super easy.
Yeah.
This one, if this failed, then yes, we would have been wiring an electric one, but this has plenty of supply to the carb. It's already regulated for the below 5 psi, so I'm not worried about fuel pressure. If we were ever to bump up maybe to dual Webers, electric pump, but you can also upgrade to a Bavarian pump, which works just as well. Buddy runs that on his. And then the other thing is this oil pressure sensor down here by the distributor right there is leaking. So it's a metal pressed with a rubber, and I'm pretty positive it's leaking in between there. I've read that is something that happens. So the next thing is I'm going to be putting in an actual oil pressure gauge. So we'll be pulling that off, getting the adapter, and running an oil pressure gauge and an water temp instead of just the dummy lights in there, and a voltage gauge. So your oil, water, and volts, I want real gauges so we know
Exactly
precise
what it is.
Yeah, so that way if the light's just on, it's not, who knows what's going on. Oh, but the one thing that will be getting replaced soon is the windshield.
Oh, yeah.
So there was always a crack. This has always been there. I don't think this one's pretty easy to see. So we took a rock on the way home, on the trailer actually.
Yeah.
And that kind of did it in for me for the windshield. Final question for the comments down below. As we talked about, we did mechanical fan, mechanical fuel pump, but in your guys' cars, do you prefer mechanical or electrical when it comes to those things? Because I know there's always a big debate on that. So let me know in the comments if you like your electric fans, mechanical fans, or electric pumps and mechanical pumps, which ones you guys prefer on your old cars. Thanks for watching.